welcome to this deep dive. If you're a project manager, a design principal, or, frankly, anyone trying to run a business that relies on precise agreements, today's topic is really going to hit home.
It definitely will.
We are tackling the single most common, most frustrating, and, let's be honest, most financially damaging threat to architectural profitability and professional sanity: scope creep.
It truly is the perennial headache. And the specific focus today, it maps directly to the professional practices of KING-KAMBUF's architecture design studios.
Right.
We're looking at project management, or PjM, issue 15. The whole thing is about managing scope creep and change during the design phases. I mean, how to document, price, and negotiate these changes without losing your shirt.
Exactly. And when most people, especially clients, hear scope creep, they picture some huge, sudden change.
Like adding a whole new wing to the building.
Right, like demanding a whole new parking structure in the middle of construction documents. But the sources we've looked at, they clarify it's something much subtler and, frankly, far more lethal. They define it perfectly. It's 1,000 paper cuts.
That analogy is so accurate. It's the cumulative effect that just kills you. It's those seemingly minor additions.
The quick changes.
Yes, exactly. The extra 3 options you ran at the client's request. The mandatory 4th meeting with a late-arriving stakeholder who needs a full briefing. The quick relayout of the executive suite.
Oh, I've heard that one before.
Or the endless redesign loops triggered because the client keeps changing their mind on something as simple as floor finishes, which then, affects the ceiling plan and all the lighting layouts. None of these alone break the bank, but every single one of them takes time.
And the compounded loss just devastates the project schedule and your fee margin.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is absolutely critical for you listening. We need to go beyond just complaining about scope creep and develop a concrete, actionable framework for control.
A real system.
A real system. The goal is to keep the project strictly aligned to the agreed scope, the agreed fee, and the agreed schedule. And this isn't about being adversarial with the client.
No, not at all. It's about professional self-defense. It protects your margin, yes, but kind of paradoxically, this rigorous process control is what ultimately protects your client relationships.
Yeah.
It maintains predictability and professionalism.
That's a great point.
And if we get to the core of this, we have to recognize the truth. Scope creep is, at its root, a management failure.
It's not a drafting error.
It is not a drafting error. It is a failure to manage the agreement. If a firm fails to document change clearly, price it rapidly, and this is the most important part, obtain formal written authorization before executing the work, they are compromising their responsibility to the firm and their standard of care to the client.
Which is why this maps so heavily onto project management principles. It's contracts, project execution discipline, quality control, and heavy risk management all rolled into one.
It really is the highest leverage area for profitability in any design firm.
So to set the stage for the solutions, we are going to walk through the system used by leading studios.
Right. We're going to reveal the 4 essential living documents that you have to actively manage to stop scope creep cold. These are the tools that separate the profitable, controlled firm from the firm that is constantly, working for free.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's get into the mechanics of cost. Why do these little changes have such a massive, disproportionate financial impact? We're calling this the multiplier effect.
Understanding this effect is the only way to understand why fast, formal management is, well, a non-negotiable professional requirement.
So what's the core principle here?
The core principle we're emphasizing from the sources is that design changes, it doesn't matter if they happen in schematic design, design development, or construction documents, they don't have a linear cost increase. It's geometric, exponential.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
As you move closer to construction, as the design resolution gets higher and the number of interdependent systems grows, the cost of even a simple dimensional change just increases drastically.
Because you've locked in more consultants and committed to thousands of detailed decisions.
Precisely.
So let's make this concrete. Imagine a conceptually simple change. Moving a primary fire-rated core stairwell 5 feet to the west. What's the impact if that change happens in SD, schematic design?
In SD, that's really just a concept shift. The drawing set is minimal, right? It's usually single-line plans, basic block diagrams. You might only have the structural engineer on board in a very limited capacity.
So the redraw is fairly simple.
It is. The change requires rerunning some basic area calculations, updating the egress concept diagram, maybe shifting a few preliminary structural columns. If we were to quantify this, moving that stair 5 feet might cost, say, 10 to 15 hours of architectural effort. So the cheapest time to pivot, but it still delays that sign-off milestone.
Okay, 15 hours. Manageable. But if that exact same request comes in once we're, say, 50% complete in DD, design development, that's where the multiplication starts.
The cost skyrockets. Absolutely skyrockets, because design development is the systems integration phase. You've got fully engaged, MEP, structural, fire protection, maybe even specialized consultants like acoustics or facade engineers.
Everyone's on board.
Everyone is on board. So moving that stair 5 feet now means, first, the architectural redraw is way more complex. You're moving walls that have specific materials, door swings, fire ratings already defined. That's maybe 50 hours of architecture time right there.
Okay, so a jump from 15 to 50 hours just on the architecture side.
At least. Second, the structural engineer has to recalculate the impact of shifting shear walls or recoordinating the slab opening. That could easily be 20 to 30 hours of their time.
And the MEP hit must be huge.
That's the most critical part, the MEP and life safety redistribution.
Yeah.
The stair core is the central artery for all the vertical runs, pipes, ducts, electrical conduits, everything. Moving it means rerouting all the vertical chases, which impacts every reflected ceiling plan, every toilet room exhaust system, and every single floor's mechanical layout. That complexity adds another 50 to 70 hours of consultant coordination across multiple disciplines.
So a 15-hour conceptual shift in SD suddenly becomes, 150 hours of highly coordinated, complex rework in DD?
That's the geometric increase. It's substantial. And we haven't even talked about code or authority review.
Right.
If that shift triggers a new code interpretation or forces a change in the building's fire separation strategy, you are looking at significant liability risk if you rush it, and just a major cost if you do it correctly.
And then we hit the absolute peak of the multiplier effect, CD construction documents. If that request comes in when the CD set is 90% complete, what kind of financial catastrophe are we looking at?
This is the most expensive phase for changes, often costing 10 to 100 times the SD cost for the same element. You are dealing with an integrated, cross-reference set of hundreds of sheets, detailed specifications, full consultant packages that have already been coordinated, and in many cases, stamped.
So the impacts are just everywhere.
They're everywhere. You're updating hundreds of sheets, yes, but also detail revisions. These are complex, interdisciplinary drawings like wall sections or custom stair details that take so many hours to coordinate. You have to update the entire specification manual for that stair's finishes, its fire ratings, its hardware.
And the permit risk.
Crucially, you risk needing a full addenda or reissue of the entire permit set, which incurs municipal fees, consultant fees for restamping, and a significant liability risk for coordination errors.
And the core liability there is the QA/QC reset.
Precisely. If you shift a fundamental element like a rated corridor wall or a core latent CD, you cannot ethically or legally proceed without initiating a full quality assurance and quality control check on that entire segment of the building.
They have to recheck everything.
Did the fire alarm device locations move? Did the ceiling height clearances change? Does the door hardware schedule still match the fire rating? If you skip that necessary QA/QC reset just to save time, you are exposing the firm to massive liability during construction when those coordination errors inevitably surface. You're sacrificing the standard of care.
That makes the argument for stringent process control not just about profit, but, it's about survival.
It is.
So let's pivot to the essential starting line for control, defining the scope baseline. Our sources call this the professional litmus test.
This is the absolute foundation of contract management. Professional bodies, when they're assessing competency, they aren't asking if you can design a beautiful building. They're testing your ability to manage the contract boundaries.
So the test is just being able to recognize what falls inside versus outside the agreed-upon basic services.
That is the test, instantly and definitively.
What are the essential skills a competent project manager must have to pass this test?
There are 4, and they are non-negotiable. First, you have to have intimate knowledge of the contract. You must be able to recognize the precise boundaries of the basic services.
Knowing exactly how many meetings, how many options.
Exactly. What type of documents you promised. If you don't know the promise, you cannot possibly spot the deviation. Second, absolute discipline over authorization control.
This means having the guts to say no.
It does. Having the intestinal fortitude to refuse to perform extra work on faith, or based on a client saying, just get started, we'll sign the paperwork later. Verbal agreements are, worthless in a dispute.
And this is where so many design professionals, just driven by a desire to please or avoid conflict, they fail.
Absolutely. The third skill is comprehensive documentation of all decisions to prevent disputes. This is the antidote to the he said, she said scenario. Written records, dated, referenced to the drawing, and linked to the specific person who approved it.
Got it. And the fourth?
You have to be simultaneously protecting the schedule and budget while maintaining the professional standard of care. This means formally identifying and charging for the work required to uphold that quality level rather than secretly absorbing the cost or, cutting corners.
So the core takeaway is undeniable. If you as the project manager don't know the exact baseline of the agreed-upon scope, you are professionally, financially, and legally vulnerable. You can't protect the firm if you don't know what you were paid to do.
That's the bottom line.
Okay, so knowing the baseline is passive, managing the change is active. This brings us to the operational solution, the 4-document system.
Yes. This is the firm's defensive armor, and these documents have to interlock perfectly. If you neglect even one of them, the whole system just fails.
Let's start with document 1, the foundation, the scope matrix. Why do we need this separate document even if we have a contract agreement?
That's a great question. The contract provides the legal framework, but the scope matrix is the detailed, practical, and client-facing anchor that defines expectations in plain language. Its purpose is to quantify and clarify expectations right up front, transforming the kind of general language of the contract into a series of clear yes or no deliverables.
So how should this matrix be structured to be most effective?
Keep it simple, preferably a single digestible sheet. The structure is basically a cross-reference table. Deliverable item times, design phase times, responsible party times included in basic service, with a simple yes or no.
So when a question comes up, you just point to the matrix.
You just refer the client back to the signed agreed-upon document. It takes the argument out of it.
Can you give us some really specific high-risk rows that every scope matrix should include to prevent those common disputes?
Definitely. Start with options. A row should specify conceptual design options included in SD, and then in parentheses, maximum of 2. Anything beyond that is unequivocally extra work, no ambiguity.
And what about things like renderings?
Another critical one. A row for rendering visualization deliverables. For example, one exterior massing model render included, with the explicit exclusion of marketing, fundraising, or specialized high-resolution renderings.
That's smart. You're preempting the scope creep.
Exactly. And for technical documents, specify the extent of coordination, for example. Detailed equipment coordination for owner-provided items, and then mark it as excluded from basic service requires additional service authorization.
That's a defense against the client buying specialty items like kitchen equipment or high-end AV gear, and then expecting the architect to spend 40 hours coordinating complex hookups for free.
You've got it. That's a classic one.
I see the immediate value proposition here. This matrix isn't just a list. It's the ultimate defense against that claim that something was reasonable to expect.
Right. You preemptively exclude items that are commonly mistaken as included. It shifts the discussion from a contractual argument to just a clear document reference. It establishes professional discipline right out of the gate.
Okay, so document 2 is crucial for maintaining forward momentum, the decision log. Design is a constant series of micro-decisions. How does this log manage that chaos?
The decision log captures key agreements and approvals immediately. It provides a documented trail for that whole iterative process. Without it, you quickly lose track of why you moved in a certain direction, especially months later when construction starts and the client has, forgotten their initial choices.
It prevents amnesia, as the outline says. So what's the absolute minimum content required for this log to be effective?
It needs to be concise but authoritative. You need a unique ID or number, the one-line description of the decision, something like, client approved DD 50% plan set and accepted the proposed cladding material, type B.
Simple enough.
Then the date it happened, and crucially, who specifically approved it, the person's name.
And you mentioned earlier the importance of email. A lot of decisions happen over email now.
Yes, and that's fine, as long as it is documented and archived. The log serves as the index that references the external document, that specific email, the meeting minute, or the signed drawing. This proactively eliminates the defense where the client might later claim, I never approved that design direction.
Or, we thought that finish was still under review.
Exactly. If it is logged, dated, and references an owner's signature or explicit confirmation, the firm is protected.
Okay. Moving to document 3, where the financial tracking begins. The change request log, or CRL, This is the running register that catches all those 1,000 paper cuts.
The CRL is the firm's central nervous system for managing deviation. It maintains visibility and control over all changes from the baseline scope and schedule. Every single conversation that leads to extra work must, without exception, result in a line item here.
What are the critical data points that have to be mandatory for every single change request?
Well, beyond the standard stuff like CR number and date received, you need robust context, a detailed description, and the precise reason for change.
So was it a client program change? A building code update?
Right, or a latent existing condition discovered during selective demo. Then, the 3 pillars of control: fee impact, schedule impact, and consultant impact. If the change affects the civil engineer or requires specialized reporting, that dependency has to be noted immediately.
And I imagine the status tracking is what makes this a living document, right? It's not just a static list.
Absolutely. The status must be actively managed, pending review, authorized to proceed, rejected by the client, or incorporated and billed. This log is the PM's best tool for communicating risk to the principal and for communicating financial clarity to the client.
Because if they see a running tally of 5 pending change requests, they immediately understand the cumulative risk to their budget and timeline.
That's it. It makes the invisible visible.
And finally, document 4, the financial trigger. Additional services authorization. This is where the paperwork turns into billable, recoverable work.
This document is the legal gatekeeper. It's a short, formal agreement, often a simple form or an email attachment, that must detail 4 things for the client's signature: the precise new scope, the agreed fee basis lump sum or NTE, the specific schedule effects, and any assumptions the architect made to generate that price.
This brings us back to the golden rule that we have to hammer home. Can you restate it with the necessary gravitas?
The golden rule is the line between profit and liability. No written authorization, no extra work, full stop.
No exceptions.
The only professional exception, and it's a tiny one, is for immediate life safety emergency actions required to prevent harm. Even then, the work is documented and billed immediately after the action is taken. Any instance where a project manager begins drawing without this authorization is not merely a bookkeeping error. It is a PjM failure that severely compromises the firm's ability to collect payment.
Okay, we have set up the system for control. Now let's talk brass tacks.money. Once a change request is logged, the clock starts ticking to price it correctly. So what are we actually pricing when a client asks for a design revision?
We have to completely reframe the mental model. You are not pricing drawings. You're not pricing the time it takes the CAD tech to move some lines. You are pricing labor effort plus coordination risk plus time delay. The drawing is merely the contractual evidence of the intellectual effort and the assumption of risk required to integrate that change into the existing design ecosystem.
That reframing is critical. So if I'm a PM and I need to price a complex CR quickly, what is the systematic real-world approach?
There are 4 systematic steps for fast, defensible pricing. Step 1, define the delta. You have to articulate precisely what is being changed, like revising 3 specific conference room layouts, and crucially, what is not changing.
Why is the not changing part so important?
Because it anchors the client to the specific, limited scope of the additional service. You say, no changes to core shell or building services are affected by this change. It prevents scope creep within the scope creep.
I see. Okay, step 2.
Step 2, estimate hours by discipline. You need granularity here. Break down the labor required into buckets: architecture, interiors, project management, and that's a billable item. And then separately, the hours required for each consultant: MEP, structural, civil. You have to get those numbers from them.
And step 3 is applying the right billing basis.
Exactly. Step 3, apply the appropriate billing basis. This is all about risk allocation, and it's where a lot of firms make mistakes. You have to choose the right contractual tool for the change.
Let's deep dive into that. When do we use hourly not to exceed, or NTE?
NTE is best when the scope is fuzzy, uncertain, or involves significant coordination risk. For example, if the CR is explore 3 options for integrating the owner's new unselected specialty equipment.
Right, because you don't know the complexity of what they're going to pick.
You don't know, so you offer an NTE cap. The benefit for the client is they know the maximum cost. The benefit for the firm is that you protect yourself if the coordination rate exceeds your initial estimate, because you can stop work when the NTE is hit and formally request a revised cap. It protects the firm against the unknown complexity.
Okay. Conversely, when is a lump sum appropriate?
Lump sum should only be used when the scope is highly defined, highly contained, and carries minimal coordination risk. For example, generating a new set of large-scale wall section details for an area that's not affected by MEP. You can predict the labor almost perfectly.
So if it's easier than expected, the firm benefits. If it's harder, the firm takes the hit.
The firm bears the full burden, which is why lump sum is so dangerous for anything that touches systems integration. We can also use unit rates for highly repeatable tasks, like $6 per revised detail sheet or $1 per meeting requested beyond the contract minimum. It provides speed and clarity for minor additions.
And step 4 is about risk mitigation, the extras that often get forgotten.
Yes, you have to factor in any necessary reimbursables, if applicable. Then, the critical piece. Coordination and PM hours. You have to explicitly charge for the time spent writing the CR, securing consultant prices, managing the client sign-off, scheduling the internal coordination meeting.
All that management overhead.
It is never free. And finally, if the scope is still fuzzy or high risk, add a modest contingency.
Let's put this method into practice with the work fee example from the sources. We're pricing a DD change, a major space reconfiguration, and new stair coordination. High-risk work.
Let's analyze the data carefully. The delta work requires. Architect, 90 hours. Interiors, 40 hours. PM, 25 hours. Those are all billed at the in-house blended rate. Then the consultants. MEP needs 35 hours and structural needs 12.
Okay, and the blended rate for the in-house team is $155 per hour. MEP is 175 hours, and structural is $190 per hour.
So we start the calculation, Arch team total hours, 90 plus 40 plus 25 equals 155 hours. So the fee is 155 hours multiplied by $155 an hour, which is $24,025. And note that 25 hours, that is explicit billable PM time dedicated just to managing this change.
Got it. Okay, MEP fee. 35 hours at $175 per hour gives us $6,125. They're bearing significant risk there.
They are, and the structural fee, 12 hours at $190 an hour gives us $2,280. Even though the hour count is lower, their specialized risk exposure is high.
So the subtotal for pure labor is $24,025 plus $6,125 plus $2,280, which totals $32,430.
Now for the buffer. Since stair integration involves coordinating high-risk elements, structural openings, fire separation, vertical systems, the risk is high. So we apply a 10% coordination contingency to the subtotal, 10% of $32,773. We'd round that professionally to $35,700 NTE.
Right. And the interpretation of why we chose NTE is paramount. We chose it specifically because this is complex integration work. If we had estimated only 155 architecture hours, and during coordination it turned into 180 hours because of some unforeseen issue with the fire damper system.
The NTE structure ensures you don't lose money, but the client is still protected from open-ended billing.
Exactly. If we had used a lump sum here, we would be absorbing the cost of that extra 25 hours. So now we have the number, and we face the client. This brings us to the professional negotiation script. This is often the hardest part, because clients can be defensive or feel like they're being nickel and dimed.
The mindset is key here. Keep it professional, not personal. You are not arguing. You are providing professional project stewardship. Your goal is to maintain a service mindset while enforcing strict process control.
So let's take that classic trigger. The client says, can you just move the stair 5 feet? It's a quick tweak. What is the professional 3-part structure for the response?
Okay, part 1 is the service mindset. Yes, we can. You acknowledge their request as achievable. Part 2, here's the impact. You state clearly and factually that this change, because it's happening in DD, requires structural and MEP recoordination, which affects the fee and the schedule.
And part 3?
Part 3 is, here's the decision they must make. You present them with the choice. Authorize the change with the attached fee and schedule delta, defer the change to a later construction phase, or substitute this new scope for something they've already paid for but no longer require.
This shifts the burden of financial risk back to the owner, but without sounding confrontational. It wins trust because you are framing the discussion around project control, not personal greed.
Exactly. The quote that should be drilled into every project manager's head is this: we can incorporate that. To keep the project controlled and protect your final deadline, we'll formally log it as CR07 with a detailed fee and schedule adjustment. We will proceed upon your written authorization.
By bringing them into your process, you establish a professional discipline that, clients respect far more than rush informal service.
It's all about control and transparency.
Okay, let's move to a deep dive into complexity with a real-world scenario, the Urban TI project. This case study vividly demonstrates that multiplier effect in action and how essential process control really is.
This is a textbook example of late-stage stakeholder intervention. We've got an 18,000 square foot tech office tenant improvement. It's located in a high-rise in a seismic jurisdiction.
And we're deep into the project.
Very. We're 60% complete in design development. We've locked in the structural grid, the HVAC strategy is designed, and the permit submission is only a few weeks away.
Then the new VP arrives, demanding a culture change. That translates into 3 design directives. A new interconnecting stair between 2 floors, conversion of fixed offices into open collaboration zones, and demanding more glass on all interior conference rooms.
On the surface, it sounds like a simple aesthetic refresh, but these directives are what we call hidden bombs. Let's walk through the actual complexity.
That new interconnecting stair. That's the big one.
That's the most explosive bomb. It demands a structural opening in an existing slab, which in a seismic zone requires significant calculation, potential shoring during construction, and relocation of slab utilities.
And it connects 2 fire zones.
Which triggers egress and fire separation requirements. Does it require vestibules? Does it need smoke separation? Does it mandate a new or relocated fire alarm panel? This change is not just architecture, it's structural and life safety engineering at a minimum.
Okay, and the change from offices to open collaboration. That has to affect the entire HVAC strategy.
Precisely. HVAC is designed based on heat load, occupant density, and partition layout. Moving from small partitioned offices with VAV boxes to large, open collaboration zones requires redistributing air, potentially changing the required air changes per hour.
Which forces the mechanical engineer to revise duct sizes and recheck clearances in the reflected ceiling plan.
You've got it. It's a total redo for them in that area.
And the more glass demand, especially in high-rises.
If those conference rooms border a rated corridor, which is pretty standard in high-rise TIs, then more glass means using expensive, specialized, fire-rated glazing assemblies. It's not just swapping drywall for storefront. It impacts the door hardware, like fire and smoke gasketing, and could trigger fireproofing requirements for the steel that frames the opening.
And every one of these changes feeds back into the schedule, guaranteeing a permit revision submission delay.
No question.
That deep analysis of complexity really clarifies why the multiplier effect is so severe. So, what is the master recipe? Let's walk through the competent architect's 8-step playbook for handling this exact scenario without absorbing the cost or compromising the design.
Okay, step 1. Freeze the baseline. This is a non-design move, but it is the most important management step. The PM immediately issues an internal and external memo.
What does it say?
It states, the baseline for design work is now frozen as of today date, and you attach the latest drawing list and scope matrix. This legally defines the scope against which the change will be priced. It prevents the client from arguing the extra work was part of what we were doing anyway.
Smart. Okay, step 2, log immediately.
Before drawing a single line, the change is formally entered into the change request log. We call it CRs05. Program reconfiguration and stair addition. You identify the cause, client-driven programmatic change due to new stakeholder input.
Step 3, rapid impact scan. You do this the same day.
Same day. The PM has to triage the risk immediately. Don't wait for consultant pricing. Check the 3 high-risk areas: life, safety, egress, path disruption, fire rating changes. Code triggers will this force a new seismic review. And consultant impacts.
So you send an immediate notification to structural and MEP.
A non-billable notification. Just, heads up, new stair location is proposed. Do not proceed with current DD work on this area until further instruction.
That immediate notification is key. You're stopping the consultants from working on elements that will soon be obsolete.
Exactly. You are mitigating the firm's liability for consultant fees incurred on wasted work.
Okay, step 4, present options, not chaos.
The client asked for a stair, but you don't overwhelm them with the complexity. You offer controlled, managed choices that are linked to cost.
So you'd articulate it like, option A.
Right. Option A. Install the stair purely as a convenience stair. Lower cost, requires fire separation, no impact on egress capacity. Option B. Fully integrate the stair into the egress system. Highest cost, triggers major code analysis, longest timeline. Or option C, defer the scope entirely to the construction manager to handle as a separate negotiated package, which protects the current design schedule.
Step 5, price and time it. This is where we run the NTE calculation from before.
Right. Deliver the fee proposal broken down by discipline hours, including contingency ND, the non-negotiable schedule delta, for example, plus 2 weeks DD phase for recoordination, plus 1 week CD phase for reissue.
Step 6. Get written authorization. This is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. You require a signed additional services authorization and an updated project schedule milestone document. Until both of those are signed, only minimal effort is expended, maybe a schematic review of options. No detailed coordination begins until the firm is contractually protected.
Step 7. Documentation hygiene.
Once authorized, the change is incorporated cleanly. Every revised drawing must show revision clouds and update the revision index. The decision log is updated. Client authorized CR05, selecting option A on date. You are linking the physical work back to the contracted agreement.
And the final step, Step 8.
Protect your QA/QC.
This is the final essential defense against liability. After a major layout change like this, you mandate a mini checklist reset. Verify all egress paths. Reconcile the new fire ratings on the life safety plan. Recheck all HVAC and lighting coordination in the affected ceiling zone. This proactive liability defense proves the firm maintained the standard of care despite the chaotic timing of the change.
That 8-step playbook is the full story of professional control. Now let's reinforce the process by focusing on the underlying principles behind management failure. The sources give us clear examples of the pitfalls architects consistently fall into.
Yes, let's talk about authorization failure. This is the greatest management risk. We see it all the time. Firms prioritizing goodwill over contractual control, which, inevitably leads to disaster. The scenario is so familiar. A client requests extra design work, say, one more full set of programmatic options than was in the contract. What is the fundamental professional risk of just doing that extra option to maintain goodwill?
The risk is twofold: financial and systemic. Financially, you're creating uncompensated services. You have donated labor that you can never recover. But systemically, you are setting a dangerous precedent that the firm performs extra work without authorization.
Which makes it exponentially harder to enforce the contract boundary on the next larger change request.
Exactly. The correct management response is always to acknowledge the request, log the potential impact, and request authorization before you proceed.
So what about the high-pressure situation where the owner explicitly says, proceed immediately, we'll sign the additional services paperwork later? If the architect agrees and just tracks the hours internally, why is that still a catastrophic management failure?
Because without the owner's signature, your internal hour tracking is merely an administrative record. It holds zero contractual weight for compensation.
So if they refuse to sign later?
If the client refuses to sign the AS document later, your firm has provided extra services without compensation authority. It turns a management issue into a legal collection problem. If the contract requires written authorization, an email describing the change or an internal hour log is not sufficient proof to secure payment in a dispute. The risk is just too high.
So the ultimate risk end isn't just about losing money on one change. It's about being fundamentally unable to defend your fee claim later on.
That's it. When teams start redesigning based solely on verbal pressure, the biggest risk is that you will be unable to recover the cost of the unauthorized work or successfully defend your total fee claim if the project goes sideways. Unauthorized work is the definition of severe collection risk.
Okay, let's shift to the importance of documentation weight. When a client challenges the scope and they claim a major change is reasonable to expect, what is the highest weight evidence that defends the firm?
You have to rely on the written, signed record. The strongest evidence is always the combination of the original signed agreement plus the detailed scope exhibit, that's your scope matrix, plus meeting minutes confirming any specific exclusions or approved baselines.
Verbal memory, informal emails. Those don't cut it.
They carry minimal weight. Professional practice relies on indisputable, dated, written contractual documents.
Let's revisit the multiplier effect one last time by looking at complexity. What type of change late in the CD phase is the absolute worst offender, the one most likely to trigger a full recoordination cycle across all disciplines?
It is always a change that impacts fundamental safety or structural systems, specifically shifting a rated corridor wall. That change ripples through every single system.
Why that one in particular?
It affects the egress path and capacity calculations. It forces a revision of the fire and life safety narrative. It moves every electrical outlet, every fire alarm device, every sprinkler head, and every supply and return register in the reflected ceiling plan. It requires updating specifications for fire stopping and rating continuity.
It's a change that hits every single consultant.
Everyone. It demands a full reset of coordination and quality assurance. A simple finish change, or even adding a render, just does not carry that level of systemic interdependency risk.
And finally, a scenario involving external pressure. If the authority having jurisdiction, the AHJ, requests a major code change during the final review phase, is that automatically an additional service?
Not automatically, no. The correct first step is not to assume it's free work or to immediately send a bill. The first step is mandatory. Documentation of impact and categorization of the change.
So whether it becomes an additional service depends entirely on the contract terms.
Exactly. Did the contract promise a guaranteed code solution on the first submission, or did it allow for standard revisions requested by the AHJ? Regardless, the architect must first document the impact, quantify the hours, and then route it through the change process, relying on the contract terms to determine cost recovery.
Okay, we have to address the most difficult scenario. The owner who is under pressure threatens to pull future recommendations or even badmouth the firm if the studio starts nickel and diming them on changes they feel should have been anticipated.
This is a high-stakes ethical and professional test. The standard of care requires the firm to stay calm, rely exclusively on factual documentation, and separate the project discussion from the personal relationship discussion.
How does a PM professionally reframe that conversation when faced with that specific threat?
You reframe it around project stewardship. The response is something like, "We understand your frustration and we value our relationship. And precisely because we value your future recommendations, we have an ethical and contractual duty to manage your project budget responsibly."
So you're not nickel and diming, you're identifying consequences.
Correct. We are identifying the financial and schedule consequences of the decisions you are making. And then you calmly present the change request log showing the factual cumulative impact of the client's requests on the agreed-upon baseline.
The ethical requirement here is transparency and process.
You rely on process over emotion. You reaffirm that you offer the same three choices. Authorize the new scope with the defined fee, defer the scope to maintain the budget, or substitute the new scope for existing elements. This reliance on documented process rather than buckling to pressure is what ultimately protects the firm's reputation for financial control.
What a detailed and essential deep dive into the discipline required to maintain control in architecture. This is not about being rigid, it's about being professional. Let's quickly summarize the three main pillars we covered today.
Pillar 1. Scope creep is not a design flaw. It is a management issue that is solved only through relentless, rigorous process discipline.
Pillar 2. You have to utilize the four-document system, the scope matrix, the decision log, the change request log, and the additional services authorization as interlocking tools to control the financial and contractual boundaries.
And Pillar 3, the rule that protects your firm from unrecoverable cost. Always require formal, written authorization before proceeding with extra services, unless it is a verified, immediate life safety emergency.
This entire framework emphasizes control, and what we've learned is that professional control actually builds client trust. Clients want predictability, and a firm that is process-driven and transparent about costs, even if they push back sometimes, is ultimately respected.
My final thought for you, the listener, is the immediate action item. You need to implement this professional discipline today. Don't let this knowledge just remain abstract.
Okay, what's the first thing to do?
First, draft a one-page change request log template. Make it easy to use internally. It has to include the CR number, a detailed description, fee impact, schedule impact, and active status tracking. Make logging changes frictionless.
And second, execute the communication drill. Write and practice the four-sentence script that is your professional standard response every time a client says, "Can we just?"
That script must A, acknowledge the change. Yes, we can incorporate that. B, state the impact. It will affect the fee by $6 and add Y days to the schedule. C, request authorization. We require your written authorization to proceed. And D, offer clear options. Authorize, defer, or substitute. Mastering that simple professional communication structure is the most practical way to protect your profit and control the project starting tomorrow.
Solid advice and a necessary challenge to complacency. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into project management and scope control. We hope this insight helps you protect your margins and master the process. We'll catch you next time.